Alright guys, and now I want to take a look at a Grandmaster game using the weakness lens that we mentioned before. Because it's one thing just to look at games briefly and not really understand what happened and just see some nice tactics and say, oh, that was cool. It's another thing to really get into the details of what the winning player was thinking, the thought process going through his head. And that's what I want to focus on today, so you can try to emulate and copy that thought process. Alright, so let's take a look at what happened here. It's a game between Paul Keres and Alfred Tarnowski. Now, Paul is one of the best players of his time, almost a world champion, very, very close. He was Estonian and revered there. He was loved by all of Estonia, and he was just playing another master, you could say, by the name of Alfred, but no one special, no one for the history books, let's say, right? We start off with a Roy Lopez, and I know that one of the earlier videos was of the Roy Lopez, so now you get to see it in action. After knight c6, bishop b5, black decides to go for the Chigorin variation. So first black goes for bishop b7. Some people play b5 here just to kick away the bishop right away. It's interchangeable, you can play either one. And after queen e2, usually people play rook e1 instead, which is something you may have noticed. So why queen e2 instead? One idea is that we can put the rook on d1 and try to go for d4 and open up the d file for the rook instead of the e file, which often remains closed. So that's why queen e2. And b5 leads us basically to a Chigorin, where black is going to go for knight a5 and c5 and try to get some control over the center. White says, I still want my d4 as usual. And black says, go away, bishop, I don't like you. And he goes for the c5 idea with queen c7 in mind. So now black gets queenside space and starts looking over the fight on d4. He can say, okay, maybe I'll challenge your center later on. At some point, I may even take twice and then play bishop b7 and attack e4 if my rook is here on e8 and I'm already castled. Let's take a look. Paul says, can I ask your knight some questions about the pin on the rook and them standing on the same file? Because if you're not careful and you just play some sort of defending move and you're not aware of the pin, that may come to cost you later on. At some point I may have takes and b5. And right now the queen is defending the rook, but I'm just saying later on that may come back to haunt Alfred. Now, for example, if they do something innocent like queen d7, that would be a huge mistake after takes and b5. Okay, so since black was aware this file should stay closed, black tried to keep it closed with b4. Now, this invites the opening of the c file, and some of you guys may say, why not just take? But when you take a pawn like that, you have to ask, who am I really helping, black or white? Who's going to be able to use the c file? And I think that Alfred was looking forward to the c file being opened, and queen c7, bishop b7, rook c8, and ooh, bishop, here I come, ooh, b3, here I come. And black has a lot of queenside space to clamp down on these poor pieces who never got to come out yet. So that's why Keres goes for g3 with the idea of first taking out all these guys, and second of all, trying to get some space, right? Trying to keep these pawns at bay so they don't just steamroll him, right? If you keep your pawns back home, like let's say you do nothing, okay, at some point, black can actually just go for a blockade and say, okay, how are you coming out now? What's going to happen to you guys? And that may actually be scary, because with all these pieces out of play, if I ever get a knight on c5, ooh, that's going to be a tasty position for black. Instead of that, Keres says, let me stop this pawn storm and at the same time get my pieces out. Right now we're going to start using the weakness lens, right? So we're going to talk about where are the weaknesses in this position. Right away, Keres is thinking about this pawn on d6. He's also looking at the delicious d5 square and the delicious f5 square, which he can use later on. Now, is he just going to plant a knight there? No, because if he puts the knight there right now, it gets captured, then black regroups his knight and then goes for f5, knight d7, knight f6, and the double pawns aren't really helping white in this case, and he lost the outpost. Instead, he wants to keep a piece on the outpost instead of keeping a pawn there. The pawn doesn't want to go there, the piece does. Okay, after castling, Keres says, here comes the d file, I'm ready to fire at the right moment. Black is just getting ready. One idea is if he plays bishop e6, knight g5 is a problem, right? And then maybe bishop g4, maybe f3, and the bishop gets harassed. So that's why, since we don't want this bishop to get attacked all over the place, we just play h6. After h6, it's a lot easier to get the bishop here and eventually go for either c4, b3, or d5, any sort of breakthrough he may have in the future. White says, how is your pawn on d6 doing? Can I ask it some questions? And also, can I ask some questions about later on playing d4, opening up my rook, and then firing on the queen who's misplaced? And since the queen tries to get out of there, the queen tries to avoid d-file attack, well, we say now d5 looks a lot better as an outpost. And now this diagonal is a lot easier for me to avoid. Like earlier on, the bishop and queen were just stopping any knight h4. But now knight h4 may be a great idea, going for the great outpost on f5. Keres decided that the d6 pawn can be easier attacked from f5. And from there we can get the bishop, we can get to h6, we have a nice outpost, we're doing great. Okay, and we can start a kingside attack, like bring in the queen and attack g7 as well. So notice how the weaknesses shift from d6 to very soon f6 and h6, later to f7. And each time Keres uses the pieces as the weaknesses shift. He uses the pieces to adjust to a new weakest link. Okay, let's take a look at how that happens. Right now, he's already looking at f6, saying that one day, he may take this pawn takes back, and queen takes f6. Especially if the knight ever gets to f5, as he does, then black already has to watch out for knight takes h6. Black tries to trade off as many evil guys as possible who are coming to get him, but he doesn't want to give away everything. And if you don't do anything, like you put this knight away, then the weaknesses behind you are going to be felt, right? For example, bishop b3 attacking f7. So that's why he tries to cover this square with the knight, tries to get rid of the annoying outpost. But even after some trades, I still have a nice knight and bishop coordinating on the h6 pawn, coordinating to attack g7 with the help of the queen. And the black pieces are passive. So even though they have squares, like the bishop has squares, it's just not a very active square on c8. The rook is not very active, and this b-file play is not really felt yet. Okay, so the knight goes away in order to avoid all this knight h6 and bishop takes h6 tricks. And also, he's getting ready to one day, maybe one day, get to f4, which is the weakness for white at the moment. If he can get the knight there and reinforce it with g5, then maybe black is doing alright. Since the knight goes away, the consequence is the weakened f7 pawn. Right? And we're going to use that with our bishop. They're trying to stop us, no problem. We know we have weakness awareness, so we know that even if they do take, we're happy to take back and demonstrate why d6 on the half-open file is going to be a dead man later on. Okay, so that's why even after the trade, we're happy with double pawns. A lot of people ask me, like, why these double pawns? Aren't they weak? Well, not as weak as the pawn on d6, which can be easier attacked, okay, which is a lot easier to get to. Okay, even after the rook covers the 6th rank, tries to cover the weaknesses, no worries. We're gonna first restrict the knight, but second of all, he's going for a deeper plan. His plan here is to land the knight on d5. If you can get the knight here, it's great, except there is a small problem. The knight on f6 is going to get in our way. How do we get rid of this knight? We push some pawns. We get the pawn after g5, and later on, even though our king is open, nobody can use him. We're also making sure that they can't kick us out at any time, because we have knight takes h6. We're restraining and restricting this knight from ever coming out, and so we can finally use the outpost on b5 with full effect. Okay, as they are aware of our weaknesses, they try to get to c3, but that's not a big deal. I can just eliminate that attack. I can put my bishop anywhere. He's not really important right now. And then I can focus on the b-file, because guess what? As they move their pieces away, as they try to defend their weaknesses on d6 and h6 and f6 and f7, those were all weak at some time. But now the new weakness is the b-file, because that's the only open file in the position. And guess what? The rook was too busy defending d6. And now I can just cover my king side, make sure my king is safe, priority number 1, and then ask them some questions about who's holding the b file, who's holding the fort. Oh yeah, your rook is too far away, it can't help anymore. So after we close up the whole king side, rook b1 is coming to take over the b file. Okay, black tries to get some counterplay on the weakened white roof, but it turns out we have some tactics to help us out here. And the tactic is actually takes, and if they decide to take on g5, we have this little intermezzo. We don't try to take right away, we take when the rook is gone. When the rook goes away, we say thank you very much, free knight. So that secures the pawn on g5. Just this ability to play knight h4 is scary enough. Okay, that black had to actually leave the g6 square. And maybe he was hoping for g6, right? Maybe he's hoping to kick away this annoying knight who was getting in his way and attacking all these weaknesses. But it's already too late. We're going to take over the b file. Their rook wishes it could be here already, but it's not. It's one move too slow. And because it's too slow, we take over the b file. And now we notice that with the b file comes the 7th rank. Their rook doesn't control the 7th rank. It can't go to e7 because our annoying knight is making sure of that. And since we can get to b7, it's going to be very hard to stop the attack on g7, which is protected but is nevertheless the newest target and weakness in black's position. As g7 tries to hide, it turns out there is a new weakness, and the new weakness is actually h7, which we will attack later on. First, kick away the queen. Our pieces are more active, so we can react to attacks with counterattacks, right? And as their pieces have to run away, it turns out this is too much to handle for black. Their 7th rank is gone. The spin on the rook is really annoying. Their bishop is passive. They have a huge weakness on d6 that is tying down their pieces to make sure they can't move. The knight is restrained. The knight can't leave anywhere. The king is weakened because these pawns have already left him. And the queen is overloaded. So all we need to do is some interference. After the interference tactic between the queen and the rook, black is going to lose the rook if he just takes, because queen takes, game over. He can't take with the queen because of the rook. He can't take with the rook because it's pinned. So the game finishes with this nice little interference tactic. Black tries to hold it together, but then we have a nice little pin and win. We pin the rook, we win the rook. The king had to go away because of the discovery, and now the knight and the queen gang up on the poor rook to win the exchange. After the rook is lost, then it turns out the 7th rank is undefendable, so we just come into f7 and say, oh, h7, your knight can't go anywhere. And that's it. So what just happened there? The weaknesses changed. First it was d6, then it was at some point h6 and f6 when we were attacking the knight and pawn, then it was f7, then we came back to attack d6 when the bishops were traded on c4, and that allowed us to eventually take over the b file, which later allowed us to take over the 7th rank with rook d7, which later allowed us to overwhelm and overload black's pieces, and eventually take over the 7th rank and checkmate. So keep thinking in terms of the weakness awareness lens, and it should change. As the game goes on, it should change for you, and your pieces can exploit the changes. Right? Hope you can use that in your games.